like creating a new identity. And he said, this is exactly what I'm talking about, because I had to kill who I was, because there was no way I was going to be able to make long-term changes if I just didn't become a new person. Because and addicts talk about this, right? Like people who are alcoholics, they had to get new friends. They had to hang out at different places because their entire life had been set up around this lifestyle for alcohol. And I would actually argue that eating disorders or disordered eating patterns is much harder to break than other forms of addiction. And you think about food addiction, well, in some ways, bulimia and anorexia are still addictions. You can't stop eating. Like if you're alcoholic, you can abstain from alcohol. If you become addicted to, say, cocaine, you can abstain from that. You can never abstain from food. And so now imagine telling a gambling addict, well, you've got to play this slot, a couple times a day, but no more. Like that's really challenging. So, I just like all this stuff. It's so important to be comprehensive with how we treat these things.
These are incredibly important points. And to my knowledge, I don't think anyone has really described it in a cohesive way, the way that you're doing here. It's so important for people to understand this because obviously as a neuroscientist, I think, the nervous system is creating our thoughts. Our thoughts and feelings are related to psychology. And therefore, of course, our physiology and our psychology are one and the same. It's bidirectional. Nowadays, there's a lot of interest in brain-body, in particular gut-brain axis, and we can talk about that. But I really appreciate that you're spelling out how there are these different variables. Each one can account for a number of different things. Exercise clearly has a remarkably potent effect, both during the exercise in terms of caloric burn, overall health and biomarkers, and then this is wonderful to learn that it can increase the sensitivity to satiety signals. I think that makes, at least in my mind, places it very high on the list of things that people should absolutely do. But that there are other factors too. And the identity piece is fascinating. It reminds me also, your story reminds me also of David Goggins, who is, he talks about his former very overweight self, almost as if it was a different person. And he uses language that I'm not going to use here. But met David, know David a bit, and he's every bit as intense and driven and a remarkable human being as he appears to be online. He is that guy. But it does seem like he had to more or less kill off a former version of himself and continues to do that every day. And I think what your point about this other fellow who does it through a similar process, the word today seems to really matter. It's not like you defeat this former version of yourself and then that person is buried and gone. You said, I killed my clone today. And that's the way that David talks about it also. So this is a daily process. And I think this is not just a small detail in tying together all these things. I think that what you are describing is fundamental because we can pull on each one of these variables and talk about each one of them. But at the end of the day, we're a cohesive whole as an individual.